Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's English mini lesson. We're talking critical thinking. And today we're going to learn the importance of critical thinking for problem solving in work, school, and everyday life with this mini lesson. You know, thinking critically means that the answer might not be found right in the reading or on the slides. It means you need to take the information that you are given, do some more research, and then come up with a conclusion. One job that uses lots of critical thinking is graphic design. The job of a designer is to solve a problem, and this means that the answer is not just there, or the client would have designed it themselves. So let's hop in.
Hello, and welcome to the English mini lesson. Some of you may be watching on YouTube. Some of you may be listening on a podcast. And some of you may be subscribed to my Substack. Whichever way you got here, I'm happy you are here. 3 quick housekeeping items we will go over each time. Number 1, be prepared. If you are listening on the podcast, grab a notebook so you can take notes. If you are watching the stream, you can take notes or even screenshots. Number 2, pay attention. These mini lessons are meant to be just that, mini. They are not long and drawn out, so put the other devices away and pay attention to the lesson we are about to go over. If you are a paid subscriber to the Substack, you can ask any questions about today's lesson in the chat and submit your review answers in there as well. Number 3, this is quite possibly the most important message. You are the captain of your own learning. You only get out what you put into your education, but no one can ever take your learning away from you. Showcase your knowledge on this subject by completing the practice questions at the end. And as always, enjoy today's mini lesson.
So, what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is the analysis of an issue or situation and the facts, data, or evidence related to it. Ideally, critical thinking is to be done objectively, meaning without the influence from personal feelings, opinions, or biases, and it focuses solely on factual information. You may be thinking, okay, awesome, but I'm going to need some examples. So, here are a couple of examples of critical thinking. A triage nurse analyzes the cases at hand and decides the order by which the patients need to be treated. A plumber evaluates the materials that would best suit a particular job. An attorney reviews evidence and devises a strategy to win a case or to decide whether to settle out of court. A manager analyzes customer feedback forms and uses this information to develop a customer service training session for their employees. So, those are some great examples in the workplace. But what about school or everyday life? You know, a person may be trying to interpret an angry friend's needs, and those needs were expressed through a rush of emotions and snide comments to then be able to give that friend the help and support that they need. A creative writer organizes ideas for the plot of a story and attends to the complex motivations and personalities of the fictional characters. A student confidently and correctly explains his or her peers the methodology used to reach a particular conclusion, or why and how a certain methodology or standard of proof was applied. Let's talk identification. The first step in the critical thinking process is to identify the situation or problem as well as the factors that may influence it. Once you have a clear picture of the situation and the people, groups, or factors that may be influenced, you can then begin to dive deeper into an issue and its potential solutions. So, how can we improve this? When facing any new situation, question, or scenario, stop to take a mental inventory of the state of affairs and ask yourself the following questions. Who is doing what? What seems to be the reason for this happening? What are the end results and how could they change? Next, let's talk about research. I get it. Magazines, blog posts, they're popular, but they are not scholarly. Academic journals, however, are scholarly. They have been written by scholars and researchers for academics, professionals, and experts in the field. The articles are longer and they report original research findings. Topics are narrower in focus and they provide that in depth analysis. Technical or scholarly language is used. Source materials are cited. Charts and graphs can illustrate research findings, and those are included. And many are peer reviewed, meaning that panels of experts review articles submitted for publication to ensure that proper research methods were used and research findings are contributing something new to the field before being selected for publication. The articles are edited and the information is fact-checked. Here's a note. While researching, you must understand the difference between scholarly sources versus popular sources. Although Wikipedia is popular, it can be edited by anyone. Therefore, it's not considered a scholarly source. However, Google Scholar is a good place to start, and you can find a link to that in the Substack on this mini lesson. Let's talk a little bit about identifying bias. This skill can be exceedingly difficult. Even as the smartest among us can fail to recognize bias, it happens. Strong critical thinkers do their best to evaluate information objectively. Think of yourself as a judge, in that you want to evaluate the claims of both sides of the argument, but you'll also need to keep in mind the biases each side may possess. It is equally important and arguably more difficult to learn how to set aside your own personal biases that may cloud your judgment. Have the courage to debate and argue with your own thoughts and assumptions. This is essential for learning to see things from different viewpoints. So, how can we improve this? Ruth Wilson of the Bridgemont Academy, she offers some advice. Challenge yourself to identify the evidence that forms your beliefs and assess whether or not your sources are credible. First and foremost, you need to be aware that bias exists. When evaluating information or an argument, you should ask yourself the following questions. Who does this benefit? Does the source of this information appear to have an agenda? Is the source overlooking, ignoring, or leaving out information that doesn't support its beliefs or claims? Is this source using unnecessary language to sway an audience's perception of a fact? Now let's talk about inference. The ability to infer and draw conclusions based on the information presented to you. That information doesn't always come with the summary that spells out what it means. You're often going to need to assess the information given and draw conclusions based upon the raw data. An inference is an educated guess, and your ability to correctly infer can be polished by making a conscious effort to gather as much information as possible before you jump to any conclusions. When faced with a new scenario or situation to evaluate, first, try skimming for clues. Things like headlines, images, and prominently featured statistics, those can help to make a point where you can ask yourself what you think is going on. Then you're going to determine relevance. What information is important? What information should be considered? You need to sort through it. One of the most challenging parts of thinking critically during a challenging scenario is figuring out what information is the most important for your consideration. In many scenarios, you'll be presented with information that may seem important, but it may pan out to only be a minor data point to consider. So how can you improve this? The best way to get better at determining relevance is by establishing a clear direction in what you're trying to figure out. Are you tasked with finding a solution? Should you be identifying a trend? If you figure out your end goal, you can use this to inform your judgment of what is relevant. Even with a clear objective, however, it can still be difficult to determine what information is truly relevant. One strategy for combating this is to make a physical list of data points ranked in order of relevance. When you then parse it out this way, you'll likely end up with a list that includes a couple of obviously relevant pieces of information at the top of your list, in addition to some points at the bottom that you can probably disregard. From there, you can narrow your focus on the less clear-cut topics that reside in the middle of your list for further evaluation. My best advice to you, become curious. Don't take information at face value. Ask why. It is so incredibly easy to sit back and take everything presented to you at face value, but that can also be a recipe for disaster when you're faced with a scenario that requires critical thinking. It's true that we're all naturally curious. Just ask any parent who has faced an onslaught of why questions from their child. But as we get older, it can be easier to get in the habit of just keeping that impulse to ask questions at bay. But that is not a winning approach for critical thinking. So, again, our last way to improve this, while it might seem like a curious mind is just something that you're born with, you can still train yourself to foster that curiosity productively. All it takes is a conscious effort to ask open-ended questions about things that you see in your everyday life, especially social media. And you can then invest the time to follow up on these questions. And now for our practice work. Choose one question and answer it in at least 5 to 7 sentences. Number 1, what is the difference between fact and opinion? Number 2, how can I discuss something with someone I disagree with? Number 3, what is the difference between work, a job, and a career? A reminder, you can post your answers in the Substack chat and get feedback. Have a great day.
Subscribers to the Substack can submit their answers and questions into the chat. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com, Shannon McNamara, and watch English in a Minute on TikTok at Udale Nisa.